A seemingly light-hearted question during an entertainment interview has given BLACKPINK's Jennie an opportunity to reveal a surprisingly clear perspective on relationships. Some things can be joked about, some standards are simply matters of personal taste, but there are also boundaries that should never be crossed in a relationship. During an appearance on the official channel of Cosmopolitan, Jennie was asked about dating and how she would respond to various relationship scenarios. Rather than offering a conventional answer, the BLACKPINK star caught the host off guard by naming ugly shoes as one of the biggest red flags on a first date. The brief but playful answer immediately became one of the most memorable moments of the conversation. Ugly shoes are obviously not a red flag in the psychological or moral sense. Instead, Jennie's response appeared to reflect personal taste, attraction, and a deliberately humorous approach to a familiar dating question. Yet that unexpected answer became even more interesting when compared with how seriously Jennie responded to questions about respect and boundaries in relationships. Ugly shoes and a very Jennie-like standard. In modern dating culture, the term red flag is usually used to describe warning signs that suggest someone could become problematic in a relationship, such as dishonesty, controlling behavior, disrespect, or a failure to acknowledge personal boundaries. Jennie took the concept in a completely different direction. A pair of unattractive shoes says nothing definitive about someone's personality. It certainly cannot determine whether a relationship will succeed or fail. Her answer therefore works best as a humorous observation about personal style rather than a serious relationship rule. And that contrast is precisely what makes the moment memorable. When the discussion remained focused on appearance and first impressions, Jennie kept things light. But when the conversation moved toward respect and inappropriate behavior in a relationship, her tone became noticeably more direct. That was when the interview took on a deeper meaning. When a red flag is no longer a joke. The host then presented Jennie with a more complicated scenario. What should she do if her boyfriend looks at her roommate in a way that makes her uncomfortable or gives her a strange feeling? Jennie did not hesitate. Always confront. Always confront the issue. Always address it directly. Her response revealed a much firmer philosophy than her playful comment about shoes. According to Jennie, if a boyfriend is openly checking out his girlfriend's roommate, it is not something that should simply be ignored. She specifically emphasized that it is not okay for a boyfriend to check out his partner's roommate. At this point, the issue is no longer simply about jealousy. It is about something more fundamental, boundaries within a relationship. A single glance can obviously be interpreted in different ways. But when someone's behavior repeatedly makes their partner feel uncomfortable, disrespected, or insecure, direct communication becomes a way to determine whether the issue is a misunderstanding or a genuine violation of trust. Jennie's position was clear: address the problem rather than pretending it does not exist. Why silence is not always the answer. One of the most interesting aspects of Jennie's response is that she does not appear to support silently tolerating behavior that makes someone uncomfortable simply to avoid conflict. In many relationships, people hesitate to address uncomfortable situations. They may convince themselves that they are overthinking, that the issue is not worth an argument, or that confronting the situation will only make things worse. Jennie's approach is different. If something feels wrong, talk about it. That does not mean every glance should automatically become an argument. Nor does it mean suspicion should replace trust. Instead, direct communication can help two people establish what actually happened, whether there was a misunderstanding, and whether a particular behavior crossed a mutually understood boundary. The host strongly agreed with Jennie, reinforcing the idea that a boyfriend showing inappropriate interest in his girlfriend's roommate is not acceptable behavior. The moment Jennie said, "Let's stop here." However, perhaps the most revealing moment of the interview came immediately afterward. The host followed up with a more personal question, asking Jennie whether she had ever lived with an attractive roommate herself. At that point, the conversation moved closer to Jennie's own private experiences. She smiled and simply replied, "Let's stop here." It was only a few words, but they established a very clear boundary. Jennie was comfortable discussing her general views on dating. She could joke about ugly shoes. She could express a strong opinion about how someone should respond when a boyfriend behaves inappropriately around a roommate. But that did not mean she was obligated to reveal details about her own romantic history. And that distinction may ultimately be the most meaningful part of the entire conversation. Being open does not mean revealing everything. For a global celebrity like Jennie, the line between sharing with fans and protecting personal privacy can be extremely thin. Even an ambiguous comment about romance can become the subject of speculation. A joke can be taken out of context. A casual reference to relationships can quickly turn into online theories about her private life. Against that backdrop, Let's Stop Here can be viewed as a particularly effective example of controlling one's own narrative. Jennie did not need to become defensive. She did not need to shut down the entire conversation. She simply decided that the conversation had reached its limit. That is a powerful form of boundary setting. 3 layers hidden inside one short interview. Viewed as a whole, Jennie's conversation with Cosmopolitan contains 3 distinct layers. The first is humor. Her ugly shoes answer transformed a familiar question about dating red flags into an unexpected and highly memorable moment. The second is directness. When discussing a boyfriend looking at a roommate inappropriately, Jennie did not avoid the issue. Her advice was straightforward: confront it. The third, and perhaps most important, is privacy. When the questions became personal enough to touch on her own experiences, she drew a line and ended that part of the discussion. Together, these 3 elements create a remarkably consistent picture of Jennie's approach to relationships and public life. She can be open without being completely exposed. She can joke without turning every personal detail into public information. And she can speak honestly about relationships while still deciding which parts of her own life remain private. The real story may not be about the ugly shoes. At first glance, the most clickable detail from the interview is obvious: Jennie considers ugly shoes a red flag. It is funny, unexpected, and perfectly suited to social media. But the more meaningful message lies in 2 other moments: always confront and let's stop here. The first reflects how Jennie believes people should handle uncomfortable situations inside a relationship. Do not ignore something that genuinely bothers you. Talk about it. The second reflects how she deals with the public. Other people's curiosity does not determine how much of your private life you have to reveal. That contrast creates an intriguing paradox. Jennie encourages confrontation when a relationship develops a genuine problem, while simultaneously demonstrating that everyone has the right to decide where their personal boundaries lie. In an era when celebrities' private lives are constantly examined, dissected, and speculated about, that ability to control one's own boundaries may be more important than ever. And perhaps that is the real red flag hidden inside this seemingly casual dating conversation: not an ugly pair of shoes, and not necessarily a single glance, but whether someone is willing to respect another person's boundaries. Jennie's message ultimately comes down to something simple: in love, be honest about what hurts you. In life, never be afraid to say when the conversation has gone far enough.